Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. On today's episode of me talking about stuff and things, I am going to be going over Return of the King, the most recent episode of Naked and Afraid. Now before I continue, link below are some referral links and a survey. Please check those out if you haven't already. Now back to the episode. We have the grand return of Stephen Lee Hall Jr., who hasn't been seen since last Wednesday in season 1. And we have two newbies. We have Allison and Jenny. Allison loves trees and has a starting PSR of 6.4, plus she brought a bug net as her survival item. Jenny starts out with the PSR of 5.9. She's the wife of Stephen Kelly, who completed a challenge in Colombia in season 17. His episode is Runaway Bride, and she is here to face her fears, and she brought a fire starter. Stephen Lee Hall Jr. starts with a PSR of 9.3 and brought a hunting slingshot with him and is here to mentor these two newbies. And the group is also given a knife and a pot. The three are dropped off in the Cumberland Plateau in Kentucky, and whenever I hear Kentucky, my first thought is Andrew Shade, because he's great and he's from Kentucky. And so that's nice. So they begin their trek to find a nice spot to set up camp, and they find a cave, and there's a water source there, and they gather firewood, and everything seems hunky-dory. But unfortunately, Jenny has a little panic attack throughout the night due to coyotes, and she's very anxiety-ridden through the nights she's there, and so she's getting very worried, and Stephen and Allison are trying to calm her down in that situation because the mental game is very tough, and Stephen has a very strong mental attitude, so he is trying to help talk her through it. The next day, try to go to a pond that's a few miles away, but they are unfortunately unable to make it just because they underestimated how much water they were going to need because it's very humid. But they managed to do some fishing with the bug net, and they catch a few minnows, and so they got a little bit of protein, but were unable to make it to the pond. And then on day 3, the group attempts their hike again, and they're bringing water and whatnot, but they encounter a copperhead, and luckily they're able to get the copperhead and have some dinner. And so that was nice for them to get some protein. But Jenny, she says she doesn't eat meat, and she was having some stomach issues after eating it, so that wasn't good. And then we jump to day 6, and we see Jenny isn't doing well mentally, and the fear and anxiety are starting to get to her. And unfortunately, on day 7, she decides to tap for the challenge just because the mental strength has waned a little bit, just because the fear during the night and worry about the animals and whatnot. So it's very unfortunate to see her go. We get a cameo from Janice, who was on the challenge Taste of Their Own Medicine, where the medics did a challenge and Janice completed her challenge, and we saw her cameo. And what I thought was really interesting about Jenny's tablet is we don't get any closing narration from the narrator about Jenny has unfortunately tapped for the challenge because of fear and anxiety due to the animals at night. Her PSR drops from 5.9 to da-da-da-da-da. We don't get any of that. We don't get her PSR, and I thought that was very odd. I know in Excel they didn't do any PSRs, and I wonder if they're going to continue that trend where anytime someone taps, they don't give an ending PSR. They only give the PSRs to the people who complete the challenge. I don't know, but we'll have to see if this is a continuing theme. And unfortunately, Jenny leaves the challenge day 7, and so it's just Stephen and Allison. And then we jump to day 9. Stephen tries to get a squirrel and misses. Then we go to day 10. They continue to hunt for protein. Then on day 11, Stephen's still hunting for food, but unfortunately, there isn't much small game for him to try to get with his slingshot. So on day 12, there's talk of moving to the big pond, and there's a lot of rain foreshadowing because Allison's worried about leaving the cave because the vegetation of the area isn't really suitable for making a shelter that is rainproof. So, of course there's rain foreshadowing in that, and we also saw it during the trailer for the episode. There was rain, so it's like, oh no. And on day 13, they move to the pond. There's the rainstorm, but they get to the pond, and the rain stops before they get to the pond, and so the humidity is crazy, and it's difficult for them to start a fire. And Allison is talking about how they need to build a fire, and she's really worried about getting the material for a shelter. And that first night they're at the pond, they're not really able to make a shelter because they have to focus on fire first to keep warm. And there's also talks of the many bugs that are around at night. So the next day they focus on getting a fire, building a shelter, and spreading ash around camp so that the bugs will leave them alone, because there's much talk of ticks during that night where they don't have a shelter. So they get that situated. On day 15, the hunt for food begins at the pond with Steven. Allison gets firewood. There's a giant rainstorm, and Steven has to shelter in place. And he is kind of crouched by a tree for a little bit, and Allison is trying to get firewood, and she's very stressed out about the whole situation. And she's basically like, hey, Steven, we need to work on this shelter. Let's leave food for later. And Steven's like, okay. And so luckily Allison finds a magnolia tree and is able to use the leaves for shingles, so that helps their situation a little bit. And Steven gets a turtle. They're able to make some turtle stew, so that boosts their moods. And then there's more rain into the night. Day 16, the rain has stopped. There's more hunting for food, and Allison decides to make a dip net where she has a Y-shaped branch and attaches the bug net to it. And unfortunately, it is unsuccessful, so they have to try their luck again on a different day. Allison hits a breaking point on day 17, and Steven decides to use his hunting slingshot to trying to make it so he can shoot an arrow with the slingshot, and then he has a string attached to it so he can kind of reel it back in. So I think that's one of the coolest innovations that we've seen during the challenge. And then on day 19, the hunt for fish continues. There's kind of some tension rising because it's like, oh, will he get a fish? Will he get a fish? And then he shoots at the water. He's like, oh, he jumps in the water. Commercial break. I'm like, I think he probably gets a fish. In my notes, I'm like, I think he gets a fish. And then after the commercial break, he gets a fish. So congrats to Steven for using his modified slingshot to get a fish. And I believe it's specifically a largemouth bass. And so they get the protein. And so they are getting a little bit of energy before heading off to extraction in 2 days. Day 20 is talks of extraction, and then finally they both reach day 21 and they hike out of there. Throughout the episode, we get flashbacks of Steven's previous challenges and how when he was on his first challenge, he got a snake and ate the heart, and then when he got the copperhead, he ate the heart. And so there are also some flashbacks of the trials and tribulations he went through. And then when he's going through extraction, we're getting brief clips of his other extractions that he did. And he's like, this is my 8th challenge that I've done. This is my 8th extraction. I believe he is the survivalist who's made it the most days without tapping from a challenge, because even though Jeff has more at this moment that we know of, Jeff has tapped from a challenge previously, but Steven has not. I know there's a lot of controversy with Last One Standing Season 1 and people saying that Steven tapped from the challenge, but according to Steven, what happened was it was about half an hour before sunset, and he needed to make a fire and boil water before the sunset, and he knew he wasn't going to make it, so he kind of reminisced about his time there and was just observing the beautiful landscape before leaving. And it was Jeff who said that he tapped from the challenge, and so people are saying, oh, Jeff said that Steven tapped, so Steven tapped, even though I don't think Steven ever said that he tapped from the challenge. I don't really care about the situation. I don't think Steven technically tapped. I think it was more he was eliminated from the challenge. And so I don't think that that should count as the quote-unquote tap out. Steven was eliminated, but whatever. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot to say about that and like, no, Jeff said he tapped, so he tapped. And cool, believe what you want. I don't think it counts, and I think I have a right to my own opinion. But anyway, Steven, as of that challenge, he has 272 completed days on a challenge. Allison completes her challenge, and Allison ended up losing 20 pounds, and her PSR goes from 6.4 to 7.4. Steven lost 27 pounds, and his PSR rises from a 9.3 to a 9.7. And so, good for them for making it all the way through. I wonder if we're going to see either of them again anytime soon. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And I think it's interesting how Jenny's husband name is Steven and Steven's name is Steven. So it'd be funny if they were on a challenge and be like, Steven, 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 Steven. How will we know which Steven is Steven? That would be crazy if they ended up on a challenge together. But anyway, that is the end of the recap. Thank you all so much for listening. Please like, comment nice things, and subscribe, and click the next video if it's mine. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And next week, we're getting 2 episodes. And this is the one where we get Jarrell and Ellie. And Ellie was the one during the trailer who was like, Jarrell is being a little bit of a man baby. So we shall see what happens. And then the episode after that, I'm not for sure about. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find a way to get the episode titles, but we are getting 2 episodes next week. So stay tuned for that. Okay, thank you all so much. Bye-bye. Future Gabe here, and I'm just realizing that production knew exactly what they were doing by bringing Steven back and by having the narrator saying how Steven never tapped from a challenge, because the arguments that have been going on the Facebook pages have been going, and it's only been 2 days since the episode aired, and so they're bringing up past challenges with Last One Standing Season 1, and, people are talking about it, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see Steven and Jeff on a challenge together soon, and if Jeff doesn't tap within the first 14 days of said challenge, then Jeff will be the first person in the 300 days, and production would probably love if Jeff would hold that over Steven's head for the rest of eternity, because production loves the drama of it all, and so I get to see all these arguments because I help moderate the True Fans page, so we shall see what happens with that, and with that, goodbye. Thank you for being here.